Did you have a team there in the sales and marketing, or were you just on your own?
For the first sort of a year, 18 months after that, we had effectively one salesperson. When we got new business leads, he would be the one also that would do that.
So he would go and be hunting the carcass, or somebody would bring back the carcass.
I've never heard customers called carcasses, but no, sorry.
Sorry, apologies.
MSPs haven't been outward looking at what the market has done, or they've been fearful of doing price rises.
That's quite a common thing within the industry. People fear the fact of going and asking for more. Why are people so scared to do that? Can you explain what you mean by customer tiering?
It's really identifying, your most important clients down to your least important clients, so in some form of ranking.
Some people use PETA as one of them.
Yes.
Do you want to describe what PETA means?
Pain in the arse.
Pain in the arse.
We've had plenty of PETAs in my time.
Hello. Network Group, with next episode in our podcast series. We're here in Bristol. Today we're going to interview a chap, Graham Stead, who I've known for the past year or more. Graham is coming from Growth Habits, and we're going to hear a lot about his background and his expertise as a subject matter expert. So this is the first in our series of speaking to some guest speakers who are not attached to the Network Group. So we're going to ask that anybody who's looking and watching this series, could I ask you to subscribe, hit the like button, or leave a comment. It's really very useful for building up this audience, because we want to get some of these great conversations out to a much wider audience. So please hit that subscribe button. It's really, really appreciated. Right, let's get into this. Hi, Graham.
Hi, Austin. Thanks for having me. Yeah, really good. Really looking forward to this.
How was your journey up? You remind me, where are you from?
I'm just down in Reading, so it's hour and a half piece of cake, actually. Nice and easy down the motorway. It's just this last bit getting into Bristol, isn't it? It's just
a little bit tight again, isn't it?
That, but yeah, all good. Thanks.
So, give us an elevator pitch. Graham, what's your background in the industry?
Oh, well, I've been in the MSP industry. I mean, I've sort of predate the MSP industry, but I started a business mid-20s, IT services business. Very sort of, make a long story very short, evolved into a support business, into an MSP, sold that business after 20 years. I guess a key part in context of this conversation actually was, in that role, I was a typical sort of MD, CEO of that business. So one day it's like the tech hat on, then it's a sales hat.
So it was your company? You were running it?
Yeah, exactly, okay. with a sort of co-partner. So I was sort of wearing all the different hats that many of the MSP owners out there have to wear from day to day.
And were you technical?
Yeah, actually came from a tech background.
So
I came out of school ultimately into Hewlett Packard. I was fixing PCs, laser jets, HP NetServers, if anybody remembers those back in the day.
We had one guy on today. It was Windows NT in '95.
Oh, right, exactly that. Yeah. And I remember talking about I think it were 40 meg discs that were like this big.
Oh gosh, I remember.
Been around a while ultimately. And like I say, we eventually sold that business just about 10 years back to CMI, who were sort of a business based over in Belfast, who are sort of starting to acquire businesses.
So remind me a little bit. I know a little bit of background, but CMI. But what stage? How did they get?
Where did they
get to?
So that was a business that was brought together in Belfast, founded really from scratch, brought together two very small businesses, sort of put them together, and when they first started, they were really just looking to sort of grow the business, sort of Northern Ireland really. And I think quite quickly realised actually there was a bigger opportunity and started to acquire businesses in the southeast of England. Okay. So my business was the second acquisition they did in southeast of England.
So CMI were out of Ireland, Belfast. You said they bought one in the UK and then they bought you.
Then mine, yeah.
Okay. So what when you went into CMI, when they acquired you, what role or how did you go into that business? Because you're coming from an MD CEO role.
Yeah, totally.
What does your transition into that organisation?
I think that was really where sort of, I guess the story comes to, because the key difference for me there was that Ken, who was the MD of CMI at the time, Ken Ralston. He was doing very much as I was, many different hats. So for his perspective, he was able to sort of pass over the sort of sales and marketing hat to me. And from my perspective, I was able to focus 100% on sales and marketing rather than to sort of balance.
So this is your full time?
That was me full time, in CMI. So I stayed.
And did you have a team there in the sales and marketing, or were you just on your own?
No, we had when I came into the business, we had two salespeople, one in sort of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and one over in South England. The lady that was actually in South England left fairly soon after, because ultimately she probably was expecting to get the role that I had. So for the first sort of a year, 18 months after that, we had effectively one salesperson. When I say salesperson, I'm talking like a commissioned salesperson. We did have a couple of
Because
like
we
client
define
services.
these as hunters and farmers and account managers and
Yeah.
sales admin. So what kind of roles were these?
These were the sales guy was a bit of a hybrid sort of account manager, a commissioned account manager growing existing accounts, and when
Yeah.
we got new business leads, he would be the one also that would do that.
Like, so he would go and be hunting the carcass, or somebody would bring back the carcass, or bring back the new client, and he would go and actually farm that as well.
I've never heard customers called carcasses, but no, sorry.
Sorry, apologies. We speak about hunter. I always had this, the hunters and farmers. The hunter
No,
goes
that's
in and
right.
brings back the...
I will remember that one. So, I mean, yeah, so we effectively, he was in that hybrid role. He was having to do a bit of both. But one of the things we did pretty early on was try to focus on having a team that was focused on the existing customers. So in my mind, there's the sales aspect and there's the customer service aspect. Yeah, and what I mean there by far there is the customer service is the ones who can deal with the invoice queries or the challenges or the periodic quarterly QBR type stuff. So it's more around service and retention. Okay. And from the sales side, then you're exactly right. In my mind, I see that you've got the existing customer. Account manager who is a sales commission and they're focused on growing and bringing new revenue into the MSP. And of course you've got the new business which brings in the new business.
So were you predominantly in the sales side or the sales marketing side or the marketing side?
I was my title ultimately was sales responsibility was sales and marketing. But interestingly, because of what we'd done, what CMI had done and bought my business and the other business before that, we'd acquired a pot of customers, but because of the way the business had been structured and the focus, there was lots of potential within that existing customer base. So we actually took a decision for probably 18 months or so not to actively focus on net new and actually really focus on growing the existing client base.
Because there's this big play on we need new clients, but actually you've left a lot on the table of the existing client base. I had one company saying that they had, in fact, it was a company from Ireland, Nostra, saying they had already acquired quite a number of clients. They had a big client base. They saw there was at least 20% growth, if not more, in that organisation, purely by going back and making sure that they had actually filled they spoke about the full book which they had with their clients, and there was just. So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm not really sure what drives it. I think maybe as an owner of a business, I think winning new logo is maybe there's a bit of an ego thing there. I feel that's if I do that, then we really are succeeding. And maybe that's why we default to go into new business. But
to be fair, I think there's a thing within our organisations. We like to come back to the team and say, "Hey, we've got a new logo," and they're going to go, "Brilliant! This is really exciting," because they've sort of been dealing with all that before, and there's a bit of history can come out of that. So, but you're saying actually the client, the stable that they've already got, there's opportunity there.
Totally, and it's the first place I go to. When even if an MSP's come to me and says, we want to deal with new logo, can you come and help us? Absolutely, but I will make sure we look at the existing customer base, because the reason the MSPs ask me, can we deal with a new logo, typically is because they want to grow. And the low-hanging fruit and the quickest route to market or quickest route to growth is typically in the existing customers.
So growing your organisation, look at your existing customer base first. What were the signs that you're looking for if you're going to have that kind of conversation?
There's several really. I mean, structure. How they've got the team structured, what they're doing, are they focusing on that existing growth? I put a KPI into. We did it at CMI, and I do it with every client I work with, which is the average gross margin per customer, and I look at that so I can. Give you an example. We grew that probably 60% in the time at CMI because of just focus on existing customers. So I'll go in, I'll do that sort of maths, and we'll look at that. And if the number that comes back just doesn't feel right, then to me that's a good indicator that there's actually potential. There's a structure. Looking at some of the sort of the maths, the financials, and how much margin we've got, how many customers we've got, and moving from there. Even just day rates, for example. I know we don't. I encourage MSPs not to sell day rates, but to sell in a different way. But we price that based on the day rates. To give you an example, just in the last couple of months, 2 of the clients I'm working with, we've increased one of their day rates by 35% and one by 25%. That's just day rate.
Day rate.
That goes straight to the bottom line.
Yeah.
'Cause
That's just straight margin.
Yeah,
That
that's just
goes
because
down.
the MSPs haven't been sort of outward looking at what the market has done, or they've been fearful of doing price rises, whatever, or maybe they just feel, that's fair value.
You just said that fear value. That's quite a common thing within the industry. People fear the fact of going and asking for more, raising their prices. This is a whole story around. I don't want to raise my prices because my clients will walk away. Have you come across that?
Oh, absolutely. And I had that challenge when we had my first business, because we were scared of doing that.
Why are people so scared to do that?
I think because you're scared you're going to lose customers ultimately. But the reality of it is, and I can't count how many times now we've done price increases either in my business or CMI or with clients I've worked with since. Just the simple mechanics of price increase is what you will gain far outweighs what you will lose, because realistically the ones that you lose, if you lose any, it will be they were half out the door anyway, or they're probably unprofitable clients, or they're not going to give you any future potential. So they're probably actually the clients that you'll breathe a sigh of relief, when they go.
So it's an interesting 2 points out of that. Point number one, those that don't be putting their prices up, it's often a sign of a lower maturity level because they haven't got the confidence to put their prices up. And second one, which I've come across quite frequently, is clients or MSPs or organisations who says, I've never lost a client. And the fact is, Matt, they're not harvesting and they're not dealing with that bottom tier of clients who are actually holding them back. And are you seeing a similar thing there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were talking initially about sort of the existing customers and that metric I use, but there is equally, customer tiering and understanding that. And just
Could you explain what you mean by customer tiering?
Tiering really just, I'm going to use gold, silver, bronze just because we're probably all familiar with that, but it's really identifying, your most important clients down to your least important clients, so in some form of ranking. Now that ranking can be lots of different things. I mean, it could just be purely financial, it could be strategic, lots of different things. So
I've heard some people use PETA as one of them.
Yes.
Do you want to describe what PETA means?
Pain in the arse. Yes,
pain in the arse.
We've had plenty of PETAs in my time, and I've had lots of relief. And actually, I mean, you come back to your point about the price increases. The point I did want to make there is courage. I often use the word courage when I'm talking to MSPs, and I see my role, or maybe even sort of organisations like the Network Group, giving the members, the support and the guidance, so they've got the courage to go and make the decision. And typically, once they've done it once, it might take a couple of times. They realise actually that there isn't the fallout they were expecting from this.
I've often heard that.
Yeah.
So let's delve into a little of some of the points which we've covered. You mentioned that our industry is changing. There's a lot of morphing going on in there. And we've heard various terminologies around managed intelligence providers, MSPs, MSSPs, TCPs. We've heard all these acronyms, which we love. Nobody understands them. Everybody outside the industry has got no idea
what is he talking about.
But there is a definite sense in the industry that there's a shift from doing that IT support, that man in the van, that support ticket, and moving to be much more strategigally enabling of our clients. Do you see that? Is that something that you know about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny. I made a comment on a LinkedIn post this morning, and I just talked about, and this isn't new. This isn't a me thing or even a CMI thing, but talk about sort of almost the three pillars of IT. And that being availability, security, and productivity. So, broadly speaking, availability clearly being keep the lights on, the support. Security speaks to itself, and productivity. That's why technology exists. If I said productivity now, most people are going to go automation, AI. But think back, was it 20, 25 years back when we had our first email servers and we had email. That was productivity game, because now we didn't have to write letters, we didn't have to run after the post to get the last postage, etc. So that gave us productivity. So in my view, the core of the purpose of technology still exists as the same, availability, security and productivity. It's just the technology's changing. So of course now we've got AI and data and all the tools that we've got. So I think the balance between those three is certainly shifting. There's less requirement on the MSP less need really on the MSP to sort of focus on the availability piece. There's absolutely, that continuing pace of change in security, and that's never going to change. Is that going to anticipate that changing? And of course, with the productivity piece now and the tools around AI and automation, that's putting more pressure on security. So the balance of what we're needing is changing. But that's from what we do as MSPs. But I think from the sort of the market perspective, from the customer's perspective, of course they've evolved. They need their technology more, and I think actually the market really genuinely understands that technology can be, a real enabler to their business.
I've been talking about this when I've seen a massive change. I personally think there's a massive change there in that we were on one side of the financial, where we're a cost structure, we're a cost to IT support, we're a cost to cybersecurity. With AI, I see we're actually going on to the other side of the equation where we're actually adding value. We can prove that we're demonstrating of cost savings, of actually increasing value. So let's just look at that true differentiation that is coming through the industry. And one thing we spoke about is discuss the need to move from vague business outcomes to true measurable impact. And that comes back to that whole conversation about automation and how you actually structure enablement. So it's actually showing us actually real value than just going and talking pretty pictures.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, let's go back 10 years or so back, the technology, a lot of MSPs are tech led, so we're thinking about the tech side of things, and even from the market perspective, they saw it as a tech thing, not necessarily a business enabling thing, unless you're a certain type of business. So I think that has hugely changed now. So, and if you think in the space in the last, I'm going to say 5 years, maybe actually a bit longer, there's been a lot of advice around go sector focus, on basically how to differentiate yourself, because as the market's become really crowded, go sector focus because you can stand out and look a bit different and talk business outcomes, and that is solid advice. But I think the challenge we've got now is all those organisations that attend network group and similar sort of events like that, those forward looking, outward looking MSPs, they've all taken that advice. So now the challenge is we're all looking the same again. So we've got to go to that next level. So I think for me, one of my beliefs and what I try and work my clients through is thinking about that productivity piece. So rather than having the conversation now with the client said, let's do XYZ project and it's going to improve your productivity, you go and do XYZ project, but there's no accountability or there's no measure of the impact on that productivity.
So you want to prove
we need to prove and demonstrate it. So it's really about, and you can start to tie that together. If you think about, let's just use accountancy, for example, as a sector we're going to focus on. So if you're an accountant and I'm an MSP, I'm going to come to you and say, hey, look, yes, we keep the lights on, that availability, but that's table stakes. But we want to really help you, make sure you've got the platforms you need, but then put on the automation and really push through your business the gains that you can get. And I'd like to have a conversation, and if I'm really focused on that sector, I'm really going to know the business drivers behind that, the KPIs you use, not just the normal...
Specific to that.
Not just the normal sort of like gross margin KPIs, the sector-specific KPIs. And I can then, because I understand those, I understand how technology can use to change those dials, I can then actually have a conversation with you that actually really ties the work that we do from a technology perspective into the gains that the business sees that actually drives those sector-specific KPIs. Just as if I was employed by your accountancy practice as your CTO, we're sitting around the board table. You would expect me to deliver some KPIs that show the work that I'm doing and the usage of my money that we've budgeted is impacting.
It's interesting you say that. I think that's one of the things a lot of people could do actually. I struggle with that. And when you're looking at a vertical market, is actually looking at what makes a difference to them. I'm interested. Can you help you deal with that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. I was just doing some work last week for a client who interestingly actually they've been completely focused on a single sector. So they're a little bit coming from the other end of the stick. They want to broaden a little bit because they're not exposed to one sector only. So we're exploring a couple of sectors. So I just did some sort of customer competitive research, looking at some competitors in their region that are focused on those sectors. I think I knew this was going to be the case, but I was still a little bit shocked by it. 60% of the competitors I found that said, let's just carry on with accountancy as practice, we're accountancy IT support specialists. they were generic. They've got that page that says IT support for accountants, but they were generic, interchangeable. You could say IT support for architects, IT support for property, IT support.
So they weren't actually.
Yeah, so it's just very superficial, surface level. Now, 5 years back, maybe not 5 years back, that may have looked different.
Yeah.
But an accountancy practice now going out to the market goes IT support for accountancy, and Google or AI or whatever is going to be presented whatever. And if you're still the generic looking page, you're just going to sort of bounce off and find the other one.
So actually, becoming focused on
Really
this,
deep.
really deep
Deep.
down. I think that I remember. I think it's. Can't remember what it was. Highly growth habits. Wasn't that? I'm trying to remember who it was, but they spoke about the scatter gun rather than the rifle. A lot of people go at the scatter gun. They're just going wide, but actually to be rifle focused on that bullseye.
Yeah.
So let's just move forward on that, because it's actually leaning into this. We need to involve the buying experience. I spoke about, because there's new generations coming in there. The next set of leaders they're getting younger. They're getting younger every year.
Yeah.
And people are not dealing with. So that next, I think you call it the millennials, the Gen Z. In fact, I was sitting speaking to a chap. It was the first time I'd met this chap. He's here. He's from another vendor, and he was born in the 2000s. And I'm going, what?
Really?
2003. He's 23. He's got a master's in whatever from Dublin University, and I'm going, I've never met someone.
That's crazy.
More in the 2000s. I'm
Yeah.
going, oh my goodness. Question there.
Yeah.
Change and dealing with how, I've been in the game for 30 years. How do I deal with somebody who's been in the game for 3 years?
Yeah, well, I'm the same. I was born in 71, and it depresses me now when you sort of, you got that sort of what year, you have to scroll so far down to get to 71. It's like, anyway.
I don't know if there's a number on mine, but I think mine was disappearing.
So I think I guess my awareness around this, because it was some of the, I sort of became aware of maybe a year or so back. There's a chap called Jay McBain.
I know him very well.
Yeah, exactly that.
Canalis,
yeah, exactly that. So at some point last year, part of his, whether it was a postal sort of research piece that they'd presented somewhere, it talked about the end of 24, early 25 was the point in time where the balance of the typical buyer of MSP services, more than 50% of them were now millennial, which I think is 29 to 45. So they weren't born in an era where tech was like really rampant, but they grew up with tech. And of course we've got Gen Z coming behind that, which is even more. So the best way I relate to this is thinking about us in our consumer worlds. We're trying to buy something in our consumer worlds that you need to go online for, and you need to do a bit of research and understand it. So we bought a log burner recently, just as a next story. I know nothing about log burner, so you go online and a bit of Google, a bit of ChatGPT, what makes a good log burner, how big does my log burner need to be for the space I've got, what fuel can I use. So you sort of educate yourself about what it is you want to buy, and then you say, okay, what sort of cost am I expecting for the log burner, and then the installation. Okay, now can you give me some people in my area that can do it? So I've gone through that whole education process, and actually to a point, I know what I want, I know the rough price, ballpark price I'm going to expect to buy. I just want to buy it from somebody I feel comfortable with. And in that example, I went to the 3 they looked at. 2 of the sites gave me a lot of information I need to know. So they confirmed the sort of pricing. It gave me information about typically how long it takes to install it, what the install process is, what the lead time is before I can have my thing installed. One didn't give me that. So the one that didn't give me that, I just bounced straight off. And I then picked up the phone and had the conversation with the 2 that did. So just relate that back into our worlds. I know there's a big debate. There's difference of opinions in the MSP world as whether we should put a price on our website or not. I'd actively encourage you to, because otherwise, if you don't, these buyers these days, they expect it. They expect transparency. They expect a lot more education, because they don't want to pick up the phone to a salesperson really early in the process.
So this is all about this buying journey.
So it's the whole buying journey, the expectation of the buyer, the way in which they buy is massively changing. So certainly people of yours and our generation who are leading MSPs need to be thinking about that. Maybe and equally then, because you're going to be competing with MSPs who are being led by Gen Z and millennials who actually just that's natural to them. Yeah, so you're going to, So it's not just about the sort of the core straw man of, sales and marketing tactics. We just got to think about actually how our buyers and things like that. And it's, we don't naturally think about that. So that's having those conversations and just looking at, what we've got on our websites, what content we're putting onto LinkedIn or what, the socials that we use.
Really enjoyed that. I think we're going to wrap it up here. One thing I just wanted to, Graham, your business is Growth Habits, and you are giving education and training to MSPs in sales and marketing techniques. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So I think the best way of describing it, I mean, I relate a lot to MSP pain points, given that first 20 years running a business as a tech founder. I've had all the pain. I've had the amount of salespeople I've hired incorrectly and sunk loads of money and loads of lessons learned. So there's that, and then my 8-9 years we had at CMI, where I was absolutely 100% focused on sales in MSP world, has really compounded that. So I think the best way of describing how I help is I'm not a sales trainer, and what I mean by that is the technique of selling. There's Sandler, there's Medic, there's all these different methodologies out there. Yes, some of what I do has to rely on some of that. We might touch on some of that, but I'm not a sales trainer. It's not about technique. It's about the activities and the behaviours that make that up, hence the Growth Habits name.
And your target focus is you want to speak to MSPs who have got, what's that?
MSPs, I mean, typically, come back to your thing about the sort of the rifle target. I use the analogy of a dartboard. So rather than like just firing darts at a wall, I've got a dartboard and then I've got my bullseye. So for me, the dartboard really is that sort of that, in people way, it's probably that 5 to 50 person MSP. Revenue, broadly, that might be 750K to 5 million. And it might be the fact, it might be...
Would they have a sales department? Or
well, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I've got a range of clients at the moment. So I've got a small 5-person MSP that, they're reasonably new into MSP world. They've got some aspirations, but they know they just don't understand the market and how to go. They're tech people. So that's from there. There's a couple of sort of 15, 20-person MSPs where they've both got sort of still founder-led, involved in sales, but do have a sales capacity within maybe one person. So I'm helping them with some strategic stuff and equally coaching. And I think it's probably a good point. In my mind, I see there's 4 roles really. There's the salesperson, the sales manager, the sales leader, and then you could put a CRO over the top of that, but we're getting a bit American, a bit grand. So really, the way I can help is that sales manager piece, because a tech-led MSP doesn't have the time, knowledge, expertise, desire to do the coaching of a salesperson, and you won't get good performance out of a salesperson without looking after them and coaching them and supporting them and guiding them. And then the sales leader strategy piece is that sort of overarching, the things we've talked about today, differentiation, etc. And I think the differentiation piece, just as a last point, I really struggle with that, when we had the MSPs I was at, because you're in your business, you're a bit too close to it, can't see the wood for the trees. I don't think I've had a conversation with an MSP I worked through where suddenly they've just mentioned something. So hold up there, Austen, just tell me, wind back, tell me a little bit about that. And there was a little just nugget of something that might not look different, but in the context of what they do, where they are, who they do it for, gives you the ability to either do something different or spin the message in so it looks different.
Great.
Yeah, but having that external perspective.
Great. This has been great. Thanks very much. If the audience would like to get in contact with you, how can they get in contact with you?
I think the best way really is 2 ways. LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just Google Graham Stead, LinkedIn Graham Stead, and the Growth Habits page. Or my website address is growthhabits.co.uk would be the best way to get hold of me.
Thanks. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
That's
Totally
good.
enjoyed this.
I enjoyed that.
So that brings to the end of this episode. We hopefully you've learned something more about the sales and marketing in the MSP space. And Graham joined us as our MSSME subject matter expert today. So Graham, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stead.
That's the end of this. I just want to remind you again, please subscribe, hit the like, leave us a comment. Really appreciated. We wish you all the best. Hope you enjoyed this episode. That's us done from here.